Okay, we're rolling again. I have loaded the first one onto YouTube. I've taken a little bit of a break because that was a lot of talking. That was an hour's worth of talking. So what I'm going to do with this, it was supposed to be the Great Depression and the New Deal together, but I'm going to break them up because I know you guys, I know you can pause and go back and all that stuff, but I'm going to break this up and go over the Great Depression and then start a new one and do the New Deal. So we left off, we were talking about the reasons for the Great Depression taking place, or what was going on in America that led to this, the concentration of wealth and then the crisis in the farm sector. So we'll go over all those here in just a moment. So when we look at it, this is the one thing, I did change the background for you guys. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest on that over there. But at any rate, these are your causes, kind of what we just had over on the other side, with a couple of other ones that took place. And then we have the effects, and some of them are short-term effects, and then some are long-term effects. Even you look at FDR's New Deal, that is an effect because it's what he has to do to combat these things. The expanded role of government, these are things that we still have today. Mass migration, still things that are happening today, or we see the results of today because of this. So some of it are short-term, schools closed, banks failed, we have banks now and all that stuff, schools are back open, except for, this month. But then, you see the long-term effects down there. So look at those, make sure you know those. Make sure you're able to take 3 or 4 from each side if you were to do an SAQ or something like that. This is another one right here. It breaks it down into, how over on the board I have the sphere. You have the social, political, economic. Religion really doesn't go into it. We talk about cultural with those. But you look at those economic reasons, the economic effects, the political causes, the political effects. And then this is a big one here. It's by itself, of course, is taking place in Germany. And we use that term down there, hyperinflation. So if you think that our recessions, if our inflations, our Great Depressions are bad, they are nothing compared to what Germany is experiencing at that time. And that's going to, of course, lead to Hitler taking over, partly because of the Treaty of Versailles, and then partly because of the economy that's taking place. You look up here, Hoover being laissez-faire, few regulations in companies and stuff. Over here you have, I think this is a huge one, the agricultural overproduction. We all know the stock market crash is kind of like the spark that takes place. And then that widening gap between the rich and the poor, that uber, wealth up here, and then everybody else is below taking place. Look at this. We ended up with 25% unemployment, which we get the impression with the Great Depression that everybody's out of work. It's not. It's, 25 to some places will say 33%. But that just goes to show you, now we're at like 3%, well, except for this crisis we have now. But just think what 25% unemployment does to a country. It's really amazing. And then, of course, FDR is elected and the New Deal programs that come in. So as we see this, these are the reasons for the Great Depression. Once again, it shows you some more and affects people out of work, shanty towns, bank failings, rural economy suffers. Hoover employs more active government involvement. As I've said before, Hoover did try to do some things. For the time period, what he was probably trying to do would be considered groundbreaking, but it's not enough. FDR comes in and just does so much more, but Hoover gives it a shot. All right, so once again, we had that concentration of wealth. Small percentage at the top has most of the wealth. Most families are earning less than $1,000 a year. 70% of the nation's families earn less than, okay, yeah, they're wrong. Right, here's what you need to look at. About 70% are earning $2,500 or less a year. And that was considered what we look at today as the minimum. So to give you an example, today we're around $18,000, I think, which is kind of what we consider the poverty line. That was the poverty line at that time. So if your family is making less than $16,000 now, then you qualify for everything. If you make less than that, over that you're not going to qualify for stuff. This is the number they were using back then. Okay. And so if you look at that amazing pie right there. Okay. You know, you got 65% making $2,000 or less right in there. And then 29%, which, you know, a little bit under a third of the folks and stuff. And then you look here, just 1% is making over $10,000. But that's an amazing thing, because they're not just making $10,000, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's, once again, that amount of money is all here in that 1%. We still have something similar to that today. Now, here's what I think is the huge thing, the farmers. So, after World War I, all of Europe and America is dependent on the farmers. Once again, Europe was the battleground of World War I. So the farmers are not able to get production going again. So everybody over in Europe is buying stuff from us. Okay? What's going to happen is crop prices are going to fall as much as 40%, and then everything starts to go down until we get going. Now, once we get going, all this is going to flip around. And that's what I want you to know. So here's what's going to take place. Once this demand gets going, once we're able to ship stuff over, okay, here we've got the demand is down because we couldn't get stuff over there. Crop prices fall. Nobody can buy it. So, of course, the price is low. Once we get through with World War I, Europe needs it. You know, we've talked about supply and demand. If there's a big demand for something, what's going to happen to the price? It's going to skyrocket. So now what starts to take place is our farmers are going to make a ton of money. Now when they start making a ton of money, there's going to have all this mechanization that's taking place. All these new tractors, plows, combines, barns, all these newfangled things. Now that's going to get our economy going again. We're talking the roaring 20s, okay? So our economy gets going, people have more jobs, you have more things for farmers to buy. They are making a ton of money. Now they're still not making enough where they can just go buy a tractor, but they're making enough where they can go talk to the banker. They can say, look, I want to buy this tractor, here's a down payment, and I'll pay per month, and look at what I'm making a year. So the banker's like, absolutely, no problem. So the farmers are able to go buy all these tractors, combines, plows, things like that. Now, they then say, well, I'm making, let's just give an example, let's say $30,000 a year on 30 acres of land. Well, if I go to this guy down the road that's not farming or not making it, and I buy his land, I can make even more money. Once again, they don't have the money in hand, but they go to the bank. And the one thing about banks do not like making loans on cars, but they love making loans on land. Here's the reason why. Because if you think about it, and they don't necessarily like making loans on houses, land they do. The reason is this. If you get a loan for a car, you can't make the payments, and let's say you bought a brand new car, they're going to repossess it. But here's the problem, it's now a used car, it's now got miles on it. They're lucky if they get the balance of your loan. They're lucky if they get that back. Whereas land always goes up in value. So, let's say that I bought this piece of land, 10 acres, 5-year loan, I pay on it for 2 years, and I default. Now what's going to happen? The bank's going to take it back. The next guy that wants to buy that land, they're going to sell it to them for face value, which has probably gone up since I first purchased it. But here's the key. So they're going to sell the land again, and they get to keep the money from the 2 years that I paid it. So they're making tons of money off land. Houses, not quite as much, because you know, houses get old, people don't want the old houses and stuff, but land, if it's just land, they'll give you a loan, because they know that they can get the land back. It's gonna hurt them a little bit in the Great Depression, but in general, that's how they're looking at it. So, the farmers and businesses are gonna go into debt purchasing this equipment. But at first, they don't think anything about it, because they're making tons of money. All right? There's an example of that. Now, the problem with that is this, that eventually, France, Great Britain, Germany, all those farmers are going to get back rolling. Well, when they get back rolling, do they need to buy product from America? No. Demand goes down. Supply is still high. What happens to the price? Price goes down. So now where that farmer was making $30,000 a year, he might only be making $18,000 a year. Not enough to pay for that tractor, combine, and land that he bought. And so he's going to foreclose on his land, he's going to go into default on the tractor, and the bank's going to take it all back. Then that guy goes out of business. So that's the problem we're going to run into with farming. All right, laissez-faire economics, as we said, all three, Coolidge, Hoover, all those guys, who else? Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, there you go. All those were just letting things go. And of course, when we start to have bad times, they thought it as a cycle, and eventually it'll come back up. So they did nothing to it, and that was the problem. They thought that business cycle would eventually come back around. Now, Congress is going to propose something to help farmers. That has been done throughout history. Okay? We did things this year when we were having the trade problem with China. There were some supplements that went to farmers to just keep them holding on. So Congress proposed it, but Coolidge doesn't like it. Coolidge loves business, manufacturing. He does not love farming. He thinks farming, kind of like Bloomberg did, farming's too easy. If you're stupid if you go into farming and stuff. And he says here, farmers have never made money. I don't believe we can do much about it. And so, of course, what's happening when Coolidge is there, he's doing everything he can to help business, but not help the farmers. That's going to hurt. And so if you look here, this is Coolidge. This is a political cartoon. And it says, this President Coolidge, this says big business. And so he is playing music for big business. What can I do to help big business? And of course, the farmers don't like him because of that. The man who builds a factory builds a temple. The man who works there worships there. He looked at factories as temples, and the people behind that as smart investment business people. That's the way he looked at them. He looked at farmers as knuckleheads. All right? Easy credit. Talked about that a little bit a while ago, just where you could get so many different loans. And of course, sometimes what happened, people would get loans to invest in the stock market. And then, of course, to begin with, you were getting enough money to pay back the loan and make a profit. But when the stock market crashes, you don't make money off of it. You still got to pay back that loan, not going to be there. Loans for equipment, like with the farmers. They were getting loans based on potential, what I can potentially make. And that was going to be a problem. So they were buying beyond their means, as they say. All right? People were trying to do things on what's called the installment plan. Keep in mind, America had not been used to that. We are so used to that today. No one buys a house with all the money. No one buys a car, just a few people writing a check. Everything's on installments. It's loans, and you pay a little bit per month. We're used to that now. Back then, that was not a thing. It starts to become a thing, but what happens is because people are able to do it, they go beyond their means. It's easy to do. When you guys graduate high school, and especially when you graduate college, you will get all these offers for credit cards, and they would just give you credit left and right. They're anticipating you getting a good job. And of course, at that time, you think, yeah, I'm making this amount of money, I can make this payment, all that's going to be really, really good. The problem is, you then start having to pay things like rent, car payment, cell phone, insurance, all that, which are things you didn't count on. And so now you don't have money to pay off that, car, that necklace you got at Zales, what have you. And that's gonna be the problem. So here you have this lady come in and see my new washer, Miss Cohen, and it says, oh, did you get one too? Everybody's getting new stuff, and it's keeping up with the Joneses. That's gonna lead to a problem. So speculation is gonna be a thing too. Now, this is like, if you've ever watched the show where they flip houses, house flippers, whatever it's called. So if you ever think about it, they are under a tight window. So they go buy this house for $30,000. They want to put $10,000 worth of improvements in it, and then they want to sell it for $80,000. They made $40,000. That's their goal. That is what we call speculation. You're hoping to buy something and then the price go up if you do some things. But now that's a gamble. That's what you got to look at. It's a gamble. If you look, whenever they do that, they're always saying, we got to sell this thing by this month. Because with every month, then they start to have to make payments. And that cuts into it. They want to buy it with the bank giving them a loan, and before they even have to pay the first payment, they've sold it to somebody else. So now they get the $80,000, they pay off the $30,000. $10,000 towards improvements, they've now made $40,000. But if they hold that property too long, it doesn't happen. Same thing with land. If I go buy 10 acres of land, I assume that in 10 years it's going to go up in value. And I try to sell it. But I want to sell it quicker. So I try to get it low, somebody is moving away, and I try to buy their land, and then very quickly turn around and sell it for a profit. That is called speculating. This is going to happen in the stock market too. What happens is and this is what takes place. I call my broker. I want to buy 100 shares of this product at $1 a share. That's $100. I have 30 days to pay it. What I want to do is in the next few weeks, couple of weeks, I want it to go up, instead of $1, I want it to be $1.50. So that I can actually sell it before I paid for it. Now I sell it $150, I take that $150, I pay the original $100, I made $50. It's a little bit like paying on margin. We'll talk about that as well. Okay? And so, of course, one of the things that happens with Hoover is he thinks it's just a detour from speculating. He just thinks we need to stop speculating for a while. Because what happens with the stock market crashing, it shows how the values were inflated. We've looked at that recently too, how the stock market has to readjust itself. Because what happens, to be quite honest, is people get excited about something. Let's say that, Ian comes out with a new product, a new shoe. Okay? He's going to sell stocks in it for $10 a share. We get in on the ground floor. And then he gets a couple of rappers to wear the shoe, a couple of athletes to wear the shoe. It's going to go up. The shoe has not changed. It's just that people got excited about it. And now it has quadrupled. So now we can sell it and make a ton of money. The product hasn't changed. It's just that people got excited about it. That's what happens. So buying on margin is like that. And what you do, I'm just going to show you purchase the stocks for a portion of what they cost. You have to pay basically what it is 10% down. You borrow the difference, you pay the interest, but you sell it before you have to pay everything else. I'll show you real quick. So let's say I got stock. This is going to be 100 shares. And they're $1 a share. So I only have to pay $10 to begin with. This $90 is due, I think it's 30 days, then back then it might have been 60 days. So what I want to do within that 30 days is I'm hoping that that dollar goes up to $1.50. Then when I make that, I can pay the rest out, sell it, pay that, and then I make a profit. It's called paying on margin. You actually bought and sold that without ever paying any money for it until you sold it. So you're hoping the stock will go up before the loan was called in. This is what leads to the crash. When everything is going good, that's great. But then, just like now, stocks are starting to dive down. It's nobody's fault, it's not business fault, the economy is ground to a halt because of the flu, the virus. Once the stock market crashes, it just goes down and down. Nobody can stop it. And so the folks who are used to doing this, everyone who did this here, they don't have any money, and that's the problem. All right? So if you look here, these are stories of boys that make money. These are like little things that they used to put out. They were like success stories, for lack of a better word. And so, of course, when you're a 18, 19-year-old guy and you're reading these little books about how this guy made it rich, this rags to riches story, you're like, I can do that too. Most of them dealt with buying on margin. For years it had worked. What would make you think it wouldn't work? And then all of a sudden we had the stock market crash. So that takes place on Black Tuesday, October 29th. Stock market crashed as prices drastically dropped. Because they dropped, now instead of being worth $1, it's now worth 50 cents, 25 cents. So not only do you not have enough money to pay that margin, you don't even have much money at all. And so that is going to be what we call the trigger of the Great Depression. So everybody goes there to Wall Street, what's going on, what's taking place. And as you look at it, this is what's taking place. Look at this, which we're seeing that today. Fortunately, we know when we get through what we have today, it's going to go back up. Back then, they did not know because it was a lot of little things that took place, not one big pandemic. It's a lot of little things today. So 16.4 million shares were sold at a loss of around $30 billion. Think about $30 billion in 1929 terms. That's a ton of money. So one of the other things that takes place is we have a tariff, the Hawley-Smoot tariff. And this is going to be a huge tariff that causes the slowdown of trade between the U.S. and Europe. Once again, we had the farmers who were doing great, and now all of a sudden, this tariff comes in, and it's going to slow down. Once our industry, because of Coolidge, was making stuff sent into Europe. But now we do this tariff, they're going to put a tariff on our stuff too, and it's going to create problems. It is a slowdown between the U.S. and Europe, and it's going to make the Depression worse. Okay? So we start to see some indicators in the nation's economy. And then here's what's going to take place once again. To me, the Great Depression was just like the perfect storm. All these, I wouldn't say they're little, but all these things took place that if it was just one thing, it wouldn't have been so severe. Today, our stock market is crashing every day. Today it's going up some, but it's still crashing. They said this morning that every gain since Trump has been president, we are right back where we started. But if that's the only problem we have, we're not in a depression, and things will eventually start to go back up. These are not only the crash, we had this, we had this, we had this, and that's going to be the problem. So banks begin to fail. Businesses have to close down because, one, nobody can afford to buy anything. And we're starting to, have that. It's not where people can't buy stuff. It's where we can't congregate. But we do think that down the road that's going to be lifted. So that gives us, positive feelings. Unemployment's going to rise. Remember, now today President Trump and Congress are doing stimulus packages to help those folks who are unemployed. Were there things like that back then? No. Those folks already, if you're a full-time employee, you can get unemployment already. If you're a part-time employer or employee, you can get some unemployment. And then if we get this stimulus, which everybody might get $1,000, $2,000, what have you, you're in great shape. Okay? They didn't have that back then. And then people had that less money to buy stuff, so spending declines. I mean, all these things are going to take place, and it's like the perfect storm. So I would do that as a list. So as you look here, bank failures are up. Business failures are up right there. They're going to come down eventually. Okay? Unemployment is way up. And then this is the one that you want to go up. It's going down. Income, that's the amount of money you bring in, and spending are down. You want those things to go up. Your income to go up, spending go up. That helps these other things. Look at this, number of bank failures. So, you know, banks go out of business. Today, not as much. Back then, banks were just Jim Bob and a couple of other buddies got together, put some money together, opened up a bank. We do it a little bit different today, board of directors and all that stuff. So what happens, of course, is the bank, let's say it's got $1 million in assets, it loans out money. Remember those farmers we talked about? Now the farmers have gone bankrupt. So the banks have tons of land, machinery, but nobody can afford to buy them. And now people want their money back. The money's not there. That was given to the farmer to make the loan, who couldn't pay it back. So now, look here. All these banks go out of business. And then if you see here, there's going to be a huge dip. You know why? Because there are no more banks to go out of business. It's not like things straighten itself out overnight. What actually takes place is that all the banks go out of business, except for a few. And that's why we go right down here. But look at that enormous amount of banks that go out of business in 1930s, right there. This is every 10 years. So what's taking place? Well, here's another thing that we won't have now, but we had back then. It's called the Dust Bowl, the Great Dust Bowl. And so what's taking place in the Midwest, mainly Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, it's right, it just doesn't rain for like years. No amount of rain, no precipitation. Now the one thing that has hurt, that the people did, that hurts them, is they did not do crop rotation, and they did not leave stuff ground cover. Because they were making all this money selling everything they could to Europe, they are trying to cultivate as much land as possible. And they did not use crop rotation where you'd have corn on one so that it could break the wind, and then low-lying stuff on it. They just, whatever was making the most money, that's what I'm going to plant. And they did it every year, and it wore out the dirt. And so then nothing grew for a while. Where they had trees to break the wind and stuff, they were cutting down trees trying to make farmland. And so what's going to happen is when it becomes extremely dry, no rain, we start having what's called these dust bowls. Over cultivation, heavy winds blew, and it leads to what we call the black blizzards. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. So what then takes place is these farmers who had taken out loans with the banks now go under. They can't keep farming. It's not going to work. So we have a great migration of these farmers in the Midwest. Tons of them go to California. Some of them go up north, but tons of them go to California. And we'll look at that in a second. So they're trying to go to areas further west. They're called the Okies, Oklahoma. A lot of those went to California. And so if you look, right here's where the Dust Bowl is going to take place. This is where it mainly is. Okay? And if you will click on this picture, it's about a minute and a half. It is a trailer. Ken Burns, who does all the documentaries, did a documentary on this Dust Bowl. And it's just a trailer, but it gives you an example of what these folks were dealing with. It is hard for us to make, look at this picture, and you just see all the dust. Look at that, all the dust, and it gets in everything. And I know in his documentary, he interviews a guy who was a little boy who was like 10 years old at the time. He lost his eye because dirt got in his eye, and they couldn't, no doctors around, they couldn't get the dirt out. And it killed his eye. And so he's blind in one eye and stuff. But what happens is, you look here, this farmer here has packed up everything they got on the truck, put all the family up there, and they're out. And they're leaving. They're going to California. You would think that would be easy. It's not. That's going to be a whole nother shebang. So if you look here, they're going up to what? Think about it, why are they going to Washington? Anybody know? Went up there to pick apples, fruits and stuff. Apples are huge in Washington. These folks are looking work. They are not leaving just to leave and get a handout. They want to go somewhere and work. They're looking for opportunity. Much like the African Americans with the Great Migration. They are looking for opportunity. So their push-pull, the push would be the Dust Bowl going out of business with their farms, losing their land, not being able to grow stuff. And then the pull are hopeful opportunities. And so a lot of them go to California. California, as we've talked about before, is a great agricultural state. So they're looking for that. All right? So after the stock market crashes, we have a panic, and people begin to go to the banks. They want their money. So let's say I go to the credit union. I might have a couple of $100 there. I don't know. Now, today I can get my couple of hundred. But if everybody in this area went to the credit union on one particular day and said, I want to withdraw all my money, would they have that cash flow? No. Because their cash flow is with people's cars, home mortgages, personal loans, things like that. But what happens, people didn't want to hear that. They had heard about the Great Depression, the stock market, and now they hear about banks beginning to fail, closing up. And back then we did not have insurance on banks. We do today. Today, if my bank down the road is robbed, my money's good. My money is okay. The federal government has insurance on it. Back then it didn't. That's why people chased bank robbers back in the day. If somebody robbed your bank, that money was gone. I mean, you couldn't get it back. That's why people would be in the streets shooting at bank robbers. Today you don't do that. You're still going to get your money back. So folks would line up and they wanted to get their money, not realizing that the banks had loaned out to people. Now the other thing that had happened is banks had also invested in the stock market, because that's how banks make money. And now with the stock market, they lose that. It's a little bit like, and your parents have it probably too, an investment portfolio, a TIA, a CREF, or a 401B or something. I got a couple of, I don't even know what they're called. But just in the last few days, mine has gone down by about $3,000, just because it's based on the stock market. I was rolling good for a while, but it's gone down about $3,000. I'm not worried. It's going to go back up, hopefully before I retire. But what if I was going to retire at the end of the school year? And that's when you cash in those things and you get the money. I would have to leave it in there and not cash it in, even though I'm retiring, and maybe look for next year to cash it in. That's what you'd have to do. These folks didn't want to hear that. I'll get what I can get. That's where we started getting, using the term pennies on the dollar. They would say, all right, what can you give me? What can you give me on the dollar? So if you had $50 in the bank, and they'd say we'd give you a dime on the dollar, that means for every dollar you have, we're going to give you 10 cents. That's $5 instead of the 50 you were supposed to get. Believe it or not, some folks would take the 5. It was better than nothing, because if the bank went under, you lost that 5. So one thing is happening as these folks are leaving the Great Dust Bowl. They're going to California, Washington, places like that. But here's what happens. After the first few hundred come, the first wave, now we have no jobs. Okay, unemployment's nil, zero. Everybody's got a job. But every job has a person. So now as more and more people start to come in, these cities start to tell them, do not come. Jobless men, keep going. We can't take care of our own. They start telling people, don't come in because we have no jobs for you. We know you're hungry. We know you have no money. Eventually, what are you going to resort to? Theft, robbery, murder, assault. Because you're going to do something to get money, something to get food. And so they're going to tell these folks, keep on moving. If you click on this picture, I think it's this one. Might be that one. But you'll see a song played by Dwight Yoakam and Buck Owens. All right, and it's called The Streets of Bakersfield. And Buck is the older guy. He's passed away now. Dwight's still in country music and stuff. But Dwight wrote this song years and years ago. And I want you to listen to it closely because it talks about when he was a little boy. He got on a car like this with his parents. They were living, I think, in Oklahoma or Texas, maybe Texas. They went to Bakersfield, California. And of course, he got in trouble because he was hungry. His whole family couldn't find jobs. But if you look at that car, I mean, they got stuff strapped to the fenders because that's everything they owned. And when they got there, they told them to keep moving because we have no jobs for you. These folks were looking jobs, but they couldn't find them. The banks closed. 600 banks closed, and then 11,000, and then 25,000. Just gets worse and worse and worse. Once again, there was no insurance to protect it. And so what starts to happen, if you look, this is a scene from It's a Wonderful Life. Comes on around Christmas time. And Jimmy Stewart here plays a guy that runs a bank. And there's been a run on the bank. He was supposed to go on a honeymoon with his wife. He'd saved up, his new wife, saved up all this money to go on a honeymoon. So as they're getting ready to leave, he hears there's a run on the bank that he runs. So him and his wife go there, and all these folks want their money. And he tries to tell them, look, the money is with loans and stuff. Please don't do this. And yet everybody wants it. They have to use their money for their honeymoon to pay everybody. They never go on a honeymoon. But they're able to save the bank. So click on that and you'll see an image from it. All right? Businesses go bankrupt. People lose their jobs. Unemployment goes high, 25%. And as I said, that is 1 out of every 4 workers are out of a job. And then, of course, those who stay are getting pay cuts and reduced hours. Very, very few percentage of people have the same job with the same pay and the same hours. So just think how tough it is if you were getting, $1 an hour and now it's 50 cents an hour. You were working 40 hours a week, now that you can work 10 hours a week. And that is what we were experiencing during this time period. So it's a worldwide shockwave taking place. The only difference is Europe had suffered theirs in the 1920s. And they are starting to recover a little bit in the 1930s when we go through our Great Depression. Germany had theirs in the 20s because they're paying the war debt. Remember when we talked about the Dawes Act? Well, that would have been nice for Germany to be able to pay us back the money we loaned them. Guess what? It didn't happen. They told us that we're not going to be able to do it. And of course, the Hawley-Smoot tariff is going to hurt us. It limits the import and export with Europe. And so we do have that worldwide depression. Like I say, time frames are a little bit different. So people lose their homes. Hoover's the president. And so what they do, we will actually do a Hooverville. We will get big cardboard boxes and set up Hoovervilles. Can't do it now, you can do it at home. But what it is, outside the cities, these folks would go, and when the cities would actually put guards so these folks couldn't come in, they would set up these little shanty towns called Hoovervilles, and it was a slap in the face to Hoover. And it was just run down, dilapidated. You might be able to find some plywood, some tin, stuff like that. Some people were homeless, they would have cardboard. So you think this is a one-room shack, and it might have 8 people living in it. I mean, you're just destitute, and you're right outside this big city here. You've come here looking for jobs because they had the factories. But when you get here, you realize there are no jobs. And then what happens is you set up this. Every day you may go in that city, seeing if they're letting people in that day to look for jobs. Are there jobs available? We didn't have food stamps. We didn't have the things we have today as government assistance. You know, think about it. Today, our school is closed, but you can come to one of the schools and get food. Okay, back then, schools didn't do that. The states didn't do it. And so we started setting up bread lines or soup lines. And if you look at it, these are the grown men. They're just lined up. Okay? We're even talking about the people who can't come getting on the buses and taking the food to them. They'd have never done that back then. Never ever done it. And it wouldn't have been, a protein, 2 vegetables, a bread, and maybe a little dessert. No, it is literally a slice of bread and a little cup of soup. That's what you got back then. And so, just the times are changing. How we rely on the government to do things for us, they were not that lucky back during this time period. Soup kitchens, mainly not the government even helped with those. It was mainly churches, that social gospel that we talked about. How the churches are going to set up things for folks to come in and be able to get soup and stuff. So now the government may have given them some money to help out, but it wasn't a government-run entity. So Hoover looked at it as this is a time for rugged individualism. The government's not going to help out. You just need to be able to figure things out yourself. You should be able to take care of yourself. Look for a job. Do not look for the government to help. Think about the mess we'd be in today if the government wasn't there to help out. But then again, I will say this. The government would not have had the ability to shut down restaurants at the time. They probably would not have had that power. We've given the government more power as time has gone on. But, I got a frontiersman here with a cabin that he made back in the day. That's what Hoover thought it should be. Rugged individualism. So, direct relief is, what can we do to get this guy help? What can we do to help him? And so, that was the difference in Hoover and Roosevelt. Hoover said we can do some things, but we're not giving it right to the person. He did say we may set up this organization or this organization to help out a little bit, but we're not going to give money to the people. Whereas direct relief is actually giving that guy cash, food, and shelter from the federal government. That type of thing is supported by the FDR, not by Hoover, though. This is one of the craziest things I've ever heard of. It's called the Bonus Army. So after World War I, the government had told all the veterans who had fought in World War I that in a few years, we're going to give you a bonus for having gone over there, spent time away from your family, your business, and we're going to give you a bonus. But it's down the road. Well, these veterans who are unemployed now, homeless, they march on Washington, D.C. And really what they just say is, we want our bonus now. We want it now. Now's when we need it. We're homeless. We're starving. My kids are starving. Hoover, being in the government, would not give them anything. Now, he even calls out the military on these demonstrators. And what I don't understand, it's always been one of my things, is Hoover could have said, okay, and I can't remember, let's say it's going to be $100. So here's what Hoover could have said, all right, if you don't take the bonus, in a couple of years when you're doing it, you get the whole 100. If you have to have it now, I'm gonna give you $50. But in 2 years, you can't get the other 50. Now, I've been in that situation myself before, and you have to decide, can I wait 2 years to get the 100, or do I have to have the 50 now? Those who were destitute probably would have went for the 50. In the long run, that would have saved the government money, because they'd have saved the money on the bonus. But he would not do anything. It was part of his laissez-faire cycle thing, government non-intervention. And so if you look, these guys march on Washington, D.C. And let's say it's 15 to 20,000 of them are in Washington, D.C., begging, demanding this money. Eventually, he has to call out the military on these guys. So if you look here, it says, coming for justice, eastward ho, we are Americans, laborers, doctors, farmers, all these are folks that had fought in World War I, and they're coming to get their money. And if you look at BEF, what does BEF stand for? Bonus Expeditionary Force. Remember, we were the American Expeditionary Force when we went over to France. Now we're going to call ourselves the BEF. And they want that money because they need it. It's not where they just want it, they have to have it. All right? So if you look here, this is them outside of D.C., and they set up little shanty towns. It says this is Hoovertown. Normalcy, prosperity, that's the name of the roads they got. We want our bonus. Can't blame them. So that is what leads to the Great Depression. And in a moment, I'll go over the New Deal, which is Roosevelt to the rescue.